Every year in late October, I always get very anxious and antisocial. I rarely answer my phone, stay home more often, and generally retreat into myself. Usually, people around me just assume I have the fall blues or something like that. Occasionally, they try to cheer me up or talk about it, but for the most part, they don't really dig into it. And I prefer it that way. Thing is, my anxiety has a reason. I hadn't shared it with anyone. I was way too confused and scared to do so. But as October passes year after year, it gets harder to bottle it up inside and pretend everything is fine. And this year, I just can't do it anymore. I used to have a friend. I'm gonna call him Jack. We were best friends for as long as I could remember, and I'd always try to be there for him. You see, school bullies were constantly giving him a hard time well, he had a difficult family situation. His dad was constantly drunk while his mom worked as a waitress. They lived in a trailer park and her salary was barely enough to provide for the family. That is why Jack was harassed and called names like white trash on a regular basis. Sometimes they were getting at me too, for being friends with him. But I'd been practicing martial arts ever since I was a little boy, and I knew I could defend myself. I tried to teach Jack some moves so he could at least protect himself when I'm not around, but Jack wasn't that kind of guy. He was always very humble and shy. He could never hit another person, not even if that jerk really deserved it. It was October 2015. Jack and I wanted to go trick-or-treating. We knew that we were getting a little too old for it, so we decided it would be our last year. As usual, I would give Jack my old costume. It was convenient. He was a little smaller, so my last year's costume would fit him. But that year, it went differently. Several days before Halloween, I received a message from Jack on Snapchat. It was a snap of him holding a creepy costume with a text. Guess I won't be borrowing your costume after all. I looked closer at the picture. The costume was really spooky. It was a black one-piece with a mask of some sort of monster, with big, sharp teeth and muddy gray eyes with no pupils. I couldn't help but be surprised. I knew Jack's mom wouldn't spend money on something unnecessarily, like a Halloween costume, and his dad simply didn't care. So him having that clearly expensive costume was unusual to say the least. Wow, that looks fantastic. Where did you get it? I was quick to reply. After a while, he texted me back. Doesn't matter, it's a long story. Will you tell me later, I asked. I was way too curious to just leave it. Jack didn't answer. I waited for about half an hour and texted him again. Hey, you there? No reply. I couldn't sleep that night. Where did Jack get that costume? Why was he reluctant to talk about it? Why would he ignore my texts? Jack's behavior was weird and totally unlike him. I wanted to confront him at school, but he never showed up. He skipped all his classes, he wasn't at our spot in the cafeteria, he didn't reply to my calls or text. I didn't know what to think and I got really worried. I decided to go to his place after school and check up on him. One road to his trailer park went past a junkyard. It was a huge lot filled with all sorts of trash. It wasn't a nice way to walk by, but it was the shortest. When I was passing it, I heard someone scream as if they were in pain. I shuddered and rushed toward the sound. As I climbed on a rusted truck to look around, I saw Terry, one of our school bullies who used to pick on Jack. He was being stabbed by someone dressed in a black costume. The attacker kept stabbing him until he dropped to the floor, dead. I was shocked and terrified. I'd never seen anyone die before, and I'd certainly never seen anyone being murdered before. It all just felt surreal, as if I was trapped in a horror movie or a shooter game. I knew one thing: I had to get out of there. I tried to get off the truck without making any noise, but that rusty piece of junk squealed as loud as a pig. The attacker turned around and I saw his face covered by a mask. The same mask that was on Jack's costume, with big sharp teeth and those muddy gray eyes. I only saw him for a second before running for my life. But to this day, I'm more than sure it was the very same mask my friend had sent me a snap of. I ran like I had never done before. When I was home, I just couldn't stop shaking. I tried to calm myself down and find an explanation for what just happened, but I couldn't. I couldn't comprehend or process what I had seen. I was so scared and confused that I didn't talk to anyone about it. I wanted to call the police, but I just couldn't force myself to speak up and have to relive it all again. That night at our family dinner, I was sitting in my usual spot, facing the window, while my parents were seated on either side of the table. That's when I saw him again. The attacker in the costume was standing outside my house, looking at me through the window. He put a finger over his mouth and the breath froze cold in my lungs. Then he pointed at both of my parents and slowly moved his finger across his throat. His threat was crystal clear. I was barely breathing, paralyzed with fear. "Honey, you're not eating anything. Are you okay?" asked my mom with mild concern in her voice. I shuddered and dropped my fork. I looked at her and nodded, trying to act normal. When I looked back, the front lawn was empty. "Are you sure you're okay? You look like you've seen a ghost or something." My mom didn't buy it. My dad chuckled. "No wonder. It's almost Halloween after all." They both laughed. I pretended to laugh along. "Yeah, I'm fine," I answered, hiding fear. I grabbed my fork and started eating to allay their suspicions. During the whole dinner, I couldn't take my eyes off the window, terrified that the attacker would show up again. But he never did. I never saw that creepy mask ever again, nor did I ever see Jack. My friend was announced missing the next day. Terry's body was found several days after that. When the police contacted me, I barely told them anything. I never mentioned that Snapchat photo I received from Jack. I never told them about seeing the attacker in the same costume. I didn't say a word to my parents either. I couldn't put them at risk like that. Maybe it's selfish and cowardly, but I just couldn't. And now it's way too late. The next year on Halloween, I received a phone call from a hidden number. I could hear someone breathing for a few seconds before hanging up on me. The same thing happened the year after, and the year after that. I know it's more likely to be just some stupid prank call, but I still shudder whenever my phone buzzes in late October. I can't help but think that it's Jack trying to reach out to me, to explain what happened, to tell his side of the story. But every time, he hangs up without saying a word.